Unacademy. Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have taken around 8 important articles. Today, we have some very important topics to discuss in the context of the India Pakistan conflict, which has been escalating over the last 2 days. So, I'll be taking some related articles as well from Indian Express and other sources to have a comprehensive discussion on this topic. And before we begin, if you're liking these sessions, do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And those of you who want the PDF of this session, please join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code on your screen. After the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. And I have a very important update for UPSC aspirants, especially those who are preparing for the upcoming prelims exam. Today, as part of the final revision series, Sham sir will be taking up a marathon session, a 12-hour marathon session, starting from 12 p.m. onwards, covering all the key portions of Indian economy, including the current affairs. To attend this class without fail, and yesterday, Abhishek sir has conducted a similar marathon on history. So do ensure you catch all these videos under the final revision series so that you can complete your final revision before you take up the upcoming prelims exam. Now let's get started with the discussion and look at the first topic. The first topic is obviously the India-Pakistan conflict, which has escalated. As we speak, the nation is in a state of undeclared war. The enemy has escalated the tensions with India, and we have seen that over the last 24 to 48 hours, India has come under a major attack with multiple Pakistani drones and missiles being fired at multiple locations across sectors. So now what we will do is, I will of course have to go beyond what's there in the newspaper. I will not only give you a brief gist of what has happened, but more importantly, we'll try to approach this conceptually from an exam perspective. Try to pick out some key concepts which can be relevant for the exam. So before I start the discussion, I know many of you are very anxious about the developments that are happening in the country. It is very natural, but don't panic, don't worry. The nation stays united and we back the government and the armed forces at this critical point. I've been getting a lot of messages, especially from aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming prelims exam. They're saying that their preparation has been distracted. They're saying they're panicking, they're anxious. They don't know if UPSC will postpone the exam or will conduct the exam on 25th of May. So the best thing I can tell you right now is don't worry about what might happen. Just focus on your preparation. Of course, you will have to keep track of what's happening. Maybe give some time to it. Take a look at the developments, but do not panic because there are many aspirants in the border areas as well who are facing blackouts, hearing and looking at explosions possibly. So keep them in your prayers. Pray for the armed forces and focus on your preparation and ensure that you focus on what you have to do. Right? And please remember, we're always there with you as well. Do feel free to reach out to us if you have any concerns or any issues that you're facing. So with this, let's get started. So let's see what has happened in the last few hours. I'm sure all of you know about the Pahalgam attack and India's response through Operation Sindoor. So I'll not waste your time over there. So after India hit the terror camps across Pakistan and POK, as expected, Pakistan retaliated around 48 hours ago. That is on the 8th of May. Pakistan carried out a multiple incursion where many drones and missiles were fired across 15 locations. Indian forces effectively defended the country. Most of these projectiles were intercepted by India's formidable air defense systems. Yesterday in the press briefing, the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of External Affairs have officially informed that Pakistan initially fired more than 300 to 400 projectiles in the first wave of attack that happened the day before yesterday. So Indian forces have successfully repelled this attack. And what we hear today is that in the last 8 to 10 hours, there have been some very big and massive developments. Until now, Pakistan was denying its act of aggression. in front of the global media, Pakistan was playing this strange game, a game of narrative, a game of information management, trying to push this on India, trying to blame this on India, to project India as the aggressor, while not acknowledging its own act of aggression against India. But finally, Pakistan has announced that it is retaliating against India. It has launched a major military operation. And we have seen around 36 locations across sectors being targeted over the last night, from Jammu all the way till Baramulla in the north. Critical strategic locations have been hit. There have been reports which have been confirmed by Indian media as well that along with possible drone strikes, there have been missile strikes, including possible airstrikes from Pakistani fighter jets aimed at Srinagar, including the strategic Srinagar airport and the Aknur air base, the Avantipura air base. These are strategic frontline air bases of India. And across the Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat sector as well, there have been multiple attempts made all the way up till Sir Creek in the Bhuj region. So essentially, all the fronts have been opened up between India Pakistan as far as the aerial conflict which is going on right now. So as of now, both the sides have climbed one step in the escalation ladder, and just now we have been receiving reports in the last 3-4 hours that we might have taken another step in the escalatory ladder, where possibly ballistic missiles are coming into play. There are reports that Pakistan might have started using ballistic missiles, possibly aimed at Delhi, which was successfully intercepted by the Indian Air Defense over Haryana. So these are indeed very alarming developments. Of course, everyone would be worrying as to what could be the next course of developments. But as I said, the Indian Armed Forces have been giving a befitting reply to Pakistan. And again, we have been receiving confirmed media reports. We are waiting for a press statement from the government, which begins very soon at 10:30 today. There are reports that India has struck Pakistani air bases. Strategic Pakistani air bases have been hit, especially the Noor Khan air base. Now, let me tell you why Noor Khan air base is critical. It is located in Rawalpindi, the headquarters of the Pakistani army. It's just 10 kilometers from Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. This critical air base, which has been a strategic air base for Pakistan, has been hit by Indian Air Force, most likely with airstrikes using standoff weapons. And along with this, few other Pakistani air bases have been targeted by Indian Air Force. And this is something we have to confirm officially from the government as well. Now, this is essentially the sequence of events and the developments which have taken place. But now, let's approach this from an examination point of view, right? Let's not sensationalize this, or let's not pay attention to all the fake news, the disinformation which is going around us. Let's get down to business. Let's look at what matters to us. Let's understand India's formidable air defense. If day before yesterday, Pakistan fired nearly 400 projectiles at India, and if India managed to intercept almost all of them, there must be something special about India's air defense. Even over the last 24 hours, since last night, many projectiles, hundreds of projectiles have been launched at India, and majority of them have been successfully intercepted. This speaks volumes about India's formidable air defense system. So air defense is a specialized branch of the armed forces that protects the aerial domain, the airspace, from any breaches by the enemy. If enemy aircraft, drones, or missiles were to breach our airspace, if these projectiles are aimed at targets in our country, destroying them, intercepting them mid-flight is the primary mandate of air defense. So Indian air defense is equipped with some of the most advanced systems in the world. There is a integrated counter UAS grid which the Indian Armed Forces have established. The integrated counter UAS grid. UAS stands for unmanned aerial systems. So this grid, in combination with our traditional air defense systems, have taken down Pakistani drones and missiles, and reportedly even Pakistani fighter jets. So this system consists of the formidable S-400 air defense system that India has procured from Russia. The S-400 is a very holistic air defense platform. It is largely an autonomous platform. India has procured three batteries of the S-400, and 2 more are pending delivery next year. And imagine, India almost failed to get the S-400 because of American geopolitics. The United States put a lot of pressure on India a few years ago to not buy Russian defense equipment, particularly the S-400. The US even went to the extent of threatening economic sanctions on India, secondary economic sanctions under the CATSA law. The US Congress has passed a law a few years ago called CATSA or CATSA, countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act. This American law has declared three countries as the adversaries of America. These three countries include Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So they are under America's primary sanctions. And other countries, third countries, if they engage in trade with these countries, especially in critical sectors like defense trade or oil trade, those countries could be hit with secondary sanctions. So US had threatened India with secondary sanctions if India went ahead with the S-400 deal. But India took a firm stand. Thanks to our independent foreign policy, the principle of strategic autonomy, India ignored the American sanctions. We managed to influence the US as well to hold off the sanctions on India because the US president is empowered under the law to grant an exemption. And India managed to go ahead and buy the S-400 systems from Russia despite the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. And this also shows the all-weather friendship between India and Russia. Russia managed to deliver on its commitment despite its ongoing war with Ukraine. During the war period, Russia transferred the three batteries which we deployed in the northern and western and eastern sectors, which today has protected and defended the Indian airspace. Apart from S-400, there are many other missile systems and air defense systems which are at play. I know the media is just focusing on the S-400 and few other systems, but there are other systems involved in India's air defense. Apart from the S-400, we have the Barak surface-to-air missiles, which we have procured from Israel. It is also part of our air defense system, which has been deployed in the ongoing combat. Then we also have the indigenous Akash surface-to-air missiles, which has performed spectacularly well in this conflict. Akash is an indigenously developed air defense system, a surface-to-air missile system, and it has shown phenomenal performance in battlefield. Because see, this is very important because Akash has a lot of export potential. Many countries have shown interest in buying Akash from India, from Egypt to Indonesia to Philippines. So this battlefield success, which India can now prove, will increase the export potential of Akash. Then apart from S-400 Barak and Akash, there are other systems as well, including the L-72 anti-aircraft guns, which are used in close range when all these systems fail to intercept in the longer ranges when the target is approaching. As a last resort, you use anti-aircraft guns where you visually spot the target and try to open fire against the target, where you try to physically destroy the target using a heavy caliber weapon system, which is the L-72. We also have other smaller systems like the Shilka, which is also of Russian origin, the air defense system again. So it's an entire combination of kinetic weapons that India has primarily deployed against Pakistani projectiles. When I say kinetic weapons are those weapons which carry out physical destruction of the target, where you pursue the target, hit the target aggressively mid-flight and destroy the target physically. That is an example of a kinetic action. Apart from these kinetic methods, our air defense, especially against drones, against armed drones, which are unmanned aerial systems. We also use few non-kinetic options, which has been confirmed by the government of India. Yesterday's press briefing, the army officer, Sofia Qureshi, was addressing the press meet, confirmed that along with the kinetic options that were used, the active air defense systems that were deployed, we have also used few passive methods of non-kinetic option, where you don't physically damage or destroy the satellite, but you bring down these objects. Any projectile, it could be a drone or a missile, you bring it down through a passive non-kinetic action. So India possibly uses electronic warfare to jam the signals, because drones might be remotely operated. There would be a radio connection between the operator and the drone. So you jam those signals, break that link. And drones and missiles rely on GPS signals, satellite signals for navigation towards their target. You jam those satellite signals, GPS signals, thereby immobilizing the projectile. So, electronic warfare is something that India specializes in. Indian Air Force, in particular, has dedicated electronic warfare units as part of the air defense systems. So, through jamming, India has been able to bring down some of these projectiles as well. And I think all of you should have this awareness about India's air defense system, which has performed phenomenally well. And according to the government, we've almost seen a 100% success rate. Of course, there are reports that few projectiles have managed to hit the target. There was a report today morning that in Firozpur, in Punjab, the one of the projectiles has hit, injuring few civilians. But again, we need confirmation from the government. We will go by the official account of what the government is telling us. But as I told you, our air defense system has performed phenomenally well in the conflict over the last 2 days. And this speaks volumes about India's preparedness. But I think we should use this discussion to even talk about what's happening in the Jammu sector, particularly in Poonch. There has been massive destruction being reported across the line of control as Pakistan has resorted to unjustified escalation over here, targeting border villages, targeting innocent civilians by resorting to heavy artillery fire across the border. This has been happening ever since India launched Operation Sindoor. Over the last 2 to 3 days, heavy shelling has been reported, mortar fire has been reported, along with usage of high caliber weapons. This is not just aimed at the Indian outposts of the Indian Army and the BSF. It is also aimed deliberately at the border villages to hit civilian locations, including places of worship, such as gurudwaras and temples. Now, targeting places of worship deliberately is prohibited under international law. It accounts for a war crime, and that is exactly what Pakistan is doing right now. More than 20 innocent civilians might have lost their lives in the Jammu sector, and the people of Poonch around the entire Jammu region, all the way from Kupwara towards Jammu, and now it has escalated towards the Kashmir sector as well, from Avantipura to Srinagar to Baramulla. So there is a separate crisis brewing over here across the line of control, where the land front has been opened by Pakistan. Whereas across Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, at least as of now, based on what we know, it is just the aerial front which has been opened. So now the question is, where are we headed in this conflict? What could be the next steps? Now, Pakistan, as I said, was playing very strange over the last few days. It was denying any act of aggression against India. Usually, Pakistan would try to boast about these attacks. It would try to claim credit for any attack on India, because this would strengthen the position and popularity of the Pakistani establishment within its population. But what was strange was in the last 3 days, Pakistan never took responsibility, never acknowledged any major attack on India. Though India was informing the world about this, Pakistan kept on denying it. So now Pakistan has changed its tracks. And last night, it has announced the launch of Operation Bunyan ul Marsus as a counter to India's Operation Sindoor. In Arabic, this roughly translates to the wall of lead or an impenetrable wall. But let's see how long it remains impenetrable, because as we can see, Indian forces have already penetrated the so-called wall that Pakistan has put up. As I said today early morning, India has delivered significant blows to Pakistani air bases. So now we are at a very delicate space with regard to the escalation ladder that exists between India and Pakistan. So let's understand this concept now. What is this escalation ladder? Of course, it's not a literal physical ladder that is present. It is a figurative escalation ladder which is present between India and Pakistan. So this is a theory, a concept that experts have developed over the years, that when India Pakistan are locked in a state of, let's say, tensions, which could escalate into low-scale skirmishes, eventually a conflict, and possibly a full-scale war. The point is, where will this reach eventually? Because generally in warfare, there is a tit for tat action. It's all about reciprocity, just like diplomacy. Warfare is also about reciprocity, especially when two rational actors are involved. Generally, of course, Pakistan is no way rational. It's always been an irrational actor. But generally, considering between two states, right, which are acting in a calibrated, measured manner, what they often do is that when they are hit by an enemy once, in a certain manner, usually you respond in a proportionate manner. Let's say one country hits a military target, you also hit a military target. Let's say one country resorts to missile strikes, you also resort to missile strikes. So this is what you mean by a proportional reciprocatory response. But in the case of India Pakistan, this may not always happen, considering that Pakistan is an irrational actor which has not only used symmetric warfare against India, but it has combined this with asymmetric warfare. Symmetric warfare is when two forces which are at the same level engage with each other, two state forces. Let's say Indian army fights Pakistani army. That's a symmetric war between equally equipped, equally positioned forces. But if you bring in hybrid elements into this conflict, hybrid elements such as the usage of covert proxy option, using non-state actors such as terrorist groups to wage a sustained non-conventional, sub-conventional warfare, as we call it, or using other hybrid methods, including information warfare, including cyber warfare, they would largely fall under the asymmetric domain, where the forces are not symmetric. They are not placed at the same level or same position. Like Indian army fighting Pakistani sponsored terrorists. That's not a symmetric war, it's an asymmetric war. So Pakistan, for a long time, has stayed away from the symmetric option, from the conventional option, because it knows for a fact that it's going to lose a conventional war with India. From more than 5 decades, Pakistan has relied more on the sub-conventional, the non-conventional option of these asymmetric attacks against India, using a mix of terror attacks, proxy wars, along with these timely military strikes as well, when tensions escalate into a conflict. So when this happens, because see, India is not the aggressor. India would like to maintain status quo. We have no business in looking at Pakistani territory. It's Pakistan which is obsessed with Indian territory. So when Pakistan instigates, provokes India, obviously India would be pushed to retaliate at some point. We have seen this happen in the past as well. So when such a clash breaks out, there is an escalation ladder which comes into play. A ladder with many steps, where each side will take one step, taking the conflict to the next level. So initially, a trigger could be, let's say, a terror attack from Pakistan, like the Pahalgam terror attack in this instant. In the current context, the Pahalgam attack on Indian civilians, where they were profiled on the basis of their religion and slaughtered brutally, marked the first escalation from Pakistan. This was Pakistan's provocation. Pakistan was the aggressor. So, in response to this dastardly terror attack, India climbed one more step. We took the second step in this escalation ladder by launching Operation Sindoor to strike the terror camps and terror facilities in Pakistan and POK. And in response, Pakistan has climbed one more step by launching attacks against India's military sites and civilians using drones and missiles. India retaliated by carrying out strikes against Pakistani cities using drones, and we even destroyed Pakistani air defense unit in Lahore. Now Pakistan has climbed one more step, bringing ballistic missiles into play, opening all the fronts, launching attacks right from Baramulla to Bhuj, even taking aim possibly at Delhi using a ballistic missile. So Pakistan has climbed the next step in the escalation ladder, and so has India. India has struck Pakistani air bases decisively. So now, where does this eventually lead? So as these countries take one step after the other, as they resort to this tit for tat response against each other, eventually this could turn into a full-fledged war, a multi-frontal war, which could possibly include a ground invasion, or possibly a naval conflict, right? We are discussing all the possibilities here. So after the breakout of an all-out war, which could be prolonged, which could be painful for both sides, eventually the worst case scenario, the unimaginable scenario, is the nuclear threshold, which might be crossed, not by India, never by India, but first by Pakistan. Possibility exists. When you war game the situation, consider the wargaming options. There is a possibility where the escalation could go one step after the other, result in a full-fledged breakout of a conflict. As I said, India always has a conventional superiority over Pakistan. India maintains a clear conventional edge. Pakistan knows this very well. It has learned that lesson very well. 1947, 1965, 1971, 1999. India has taught this lesson to Pakistan repeatedly that we have conventional superiority and Pakistani conventional forces will be defeated eventually. But at that point, right, if you were ever to reach that point, what next? What would Pakistan do next? Because don't forget, Pakistan possesses tactical battlefield nukes, TBNs, tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. These are small scale, small yield nuclear warheads mounted on short range ballistic missiles, which could be aimed at the battlefield itself, which could be aimed at Indian forces or Indian military assets. So, if at all that nuclear threshold is breached, India has guaranteed mutually assured destruction or guaranteed second strike to ensure a complete wipeout of the enemy. So, this is the escalation ladder that right now India Pakistan are climbing. It is indeed a dangerous spiral, but India still has plenty of options to keep this under control, and this includes a variety of options: diplomatic, military, and covert options. So, going forward, of course, it's hard to predict what might happen. But as I said, there is global pressure building up more on Pakistan than India. The United States, in particular, has washed its hands off the conflict. Though Trump has called for de escalation, they would like to see the conflict end. The vice president's statement from the US, JD Vance, has said interfering between India and Pakistan is none of their business. So this works in India's favor. As long as India has a free hand in the neighborhood, right, we can leverage and engage all the options against Pakistan. Because previously, what would happen is that right at the moment when tensions should escalate between India and Pakistan, the US would interfere. We have seen this happen in 99, 98, 2001, 2008. Multiple times the US has interfered, putting pressure on both the sides to take a step back. So now this may not happen. And what we are seeing is that the US is trying to put slightly more pressure on Pakistan. The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has spoken to Pakistani leaders, including the army chief and the prime minister, asking Pakistan to take the first step back. But what is concerning is the stand of Europe. Most European powers are appearing to take both sides or appearing to appeal to both India and Pakistan to tone down and almost ignoring the fact that it was Pakistan which carried out the initial aggression. This could also be a result of two factors, right? Why Europe is taking such a controversial position. Why are they not with India? India has to be their largest market, one of their critical trading partners. We have strategic relations with them. But still, why are they trying this balancing act? So there are two reasons which could explain that. One, a historical hangover, a colonial Cold War hangover. Because since many decades, the West in general has been more Pakistan aligned, Pakistan biased compared to India, especially over the Kashmir issue. But today, more than that, Europe could be looking at this in a more pragmatic way. They would be seeing that India backed Russia in the Ukraine war. They always had a complaint about this, that India is supporting Russia. India has bypassed the sanctions. India is buying oil from them, buying weapons from them. This could be Europe's way of retaliating against India by trying to take both sides. But however, what is comforting is that the G7, the seven countries, the industrialized nations, have recently issued a statement few hours ago condemning the Pahalgam attack as a terrorist attack. But they have urged both India and Pakistan to tone down the tensions. So there would be foreign pressure which would build up. But as I said, India has plenty of options in its arsenal: diplomatic options, military options, including covert and economic options, to ensure that it achieves the results it wants, which is basically to put an end to Pakistan sponsored terrorism, to create a deterrence, a strong deterrence, so that another Pahalgam would never happen. So it's still very early to predict what exactly might happen. As I said, things are developing at a rapid pace. So let's wait for the press meet. I think it should have begun by now. So let's cover this more frequently. There are many more topics under this issue. If you would like me to discuss those topics, please let me know in the comments. For example, it's important to understand the role of Turkey in this conflict. You need to understand the Turkey, Pakistan, China nexus. So it's a very elaborate discussion altogether. It has to be a separate discussion altogether. So if you'd like me to cover this topic separately, do let me know in the comments. Please comment below, and I would try to cover this topic separately. And also, it's important to understand the role of drones in today's warfare. India clearly has shown drone superiority in the current conflict. So maybe this could be a separate topic of discussion. India's drone superiority. What drones did India use to attack Pakistan? What systems did India deploy to defend itself against Pakistani drones? Right? Because we have seen drones play a big role in today's conflicts, be it in Russia-Ukraine war, in the Gaza war, or the Israel-Iran tensions, Israel-Houthi tensions, Israel-Hezbollah tensions. We have seen increased usage of drones in combat. So I think that's something we should focus upon as well, right? So let's try to discuss this maybe in a separate video. If you guys want the discussion, please let me know in the comments. Type yes in the comments or mention which topic you would like to talk about, and I would try to cover that separately. Next, I'm moving on to the next topic. It's a related topic. I would like to talk about the massive information warfare which Pakistan has unleashed against India. We have seen that social media and as well as Western media, which is more than willing to cater to Pakistan, they have been flooded with fake news, flooded with disinformation aimed at discrediting India, to demoralize India and Indian forces, and to shift the narrative in favor of Pakistan, to project Pakistan as a victim and India as the aggressor. So, information management is critical in a conflict, and Pakistan is a master at deceit. It has been a master in spreading fake news and propaganda for many years. Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, and its media arm, the ISPR, has been a pioneer of spreading fake news propaganda, to shift the narrative, to shape the narrative to suit its interests. This has largely worked for Pakistan as it is able to get that support from the West. If you don't believe me, just open the website of CNN, BBC, other so called reputed Western media channels. Look at their headlines, look at what they're reporting. They are just reporting Pakistani narrative. They have become the mouthpiece of the Pakistani establishment, and they are almost deliberately, it appears it's almost deliberate. They are keeping down India's version of the story. They are underreporting or even trying to hide the Indian narrative while giving space only for the Pakistani narrative. There have been these unsubstantiated claims that multiple Indian fighter jets and planes have been shot down, which has not been confirmed. But still, Pakistan has went on with this propaganda, spreading fake videos, using old rehashed visuals from other crashes or old conflicts, spreading it on social media and serving it up to Western media. And they're gladly picking it up without fact checking, without verifying it, without asking India about the other side of the story, reporting it in their headlines. So this doesn't happen on its own. It's not just a coincidence. There is a careful campaign which is being waged. This is what we call as war, psychological warfare. Don't think wars are fought just in the air, land, and sea. Those are traditional domains of warfare. Today, there are many sub-conventional, non-traditional domains of warfare. Did you know that there is something called lawfare, where you fight a conflict with your enemy using international law, using international treaties, conventions, dragging them into court cases at ICJ and other international organizations. So, similarly, there is economic warfare, trying to restrict the trade, trying to bring sanctions, trying to get a country grey listed or blacklisted by the FATF, which India has attempted against Pakistan. So, that is economic warfare. And similarly, there is psychological warfare, where the two states which are at conflict, they primarily use their intelligence agencies to shift the narrative, to shape the narrative, to suit their interests, to undermine the image of the enemy, to break their morale, to over exaggerate our own achievements. That is what is done in psychological warfare, which has a huge impact. During the Cold War, we saw this effectively being employed by US and Soviet Union. Their intelligence agencies, the CIA and the KGB, they were masters of psychological warfare. How do you think Western American culture, Hollywood movies, American music became so popular? There is a clear state-driven intent where the US state, the CIA, would back and give a push for America's soft power during the Cold War period. Same with the Russians, the Soviets. The KGB would encourage a Soviet narrative. They would try to push pro-Soviet articles in newspapers. They would try to sponsor movies or radio shows which would favor the communist narrative. So this is something which we have seen between India Pakistan as well. India also engages in narrative management, but Pakistan, given its inclination towards fake news and disinformation, it seems to do more damage to India's reputation. So this is something India should counter more effectively. That explains why the government has asked social media outlets to take down many accounts. More than 8,000 accounts have been blocked. Especially the platform X has become a hub of fake news. Compared to any other social media platform, X has become the most notorious, especially since it was taken over by Elon Musk. It has become a factory of fake news. Trust me, almost 70 to 80% of what you see here has become fake. That's because of policies of Elon Musk, policies of X. Elon Musk has essentially allowed anybody to become a content reviewer, a content moderator. Right? For a price, you can buy the rights to moderate content, to review, verify content, and anybody can do this. You can attach fraudulent sources and show that a report or a visual or a video or a image is authentic. And this goes viral, this gets reposted, right? And there's an entire machinery behind this, and it gets further amplified when civilians, people start sharing and reposting it. So there's a lot of disinformation that's flying around, fake news that's going around. So that's why be very careful regarding what you share and what you believe. Cross-check, fact verify, rely on official statements of the government of India. Focus on reliable, verifiable sources, trusted sources in the Indian media. Right? Again, of course, there are questions about credibility of Indian media as well, right? Especially the news channels, the broadcast media of India has a very poor reputation. But I'm referring to credible outlets, credible newspapers, which are known to bring out credible information. But more importantly, look at the government, look at PIB, look at Defense Ministry press releases, look at the press briefings. That gives you a clear idea as to what's happening. But one concern also has come up, which we have to bring up. It appears that there is a gag on information flow, which obviously happens during conflict. Generally, the government sends out a silent directive to the media to not report everything live. And there is a reason behind it, a very valid, genuine reason. Because live reporting or sensationalized reporting or unverified reporting might end up compromising operational secrecy. If you start reporting on live troop movements, live visuals of ongoing combat, right, you will end up feeding the enemy with intelligence, open source intelligence. We have seen this happen during 26/11 Mumbai attacks, where Indian media gave live coverage and it in a way helped the handlers sitting in Karachi who are guiding the terrorists based on media reports. So the government of India has placed a clear gag on live reporting. That's why you're seeing a slowdown in information. The last 2-3 days, you're not getting any clear, concrete data and information and evidence. That's because the information has been slowed down. The government has gagged the flow of information, which has to be done as well during wars and conflict. But again, to what extent will it be done? What's the accountability here? Will the government start curbing dissent? Let's say opposition, media, activists, they want to raise questions about the efficiency of the government in leading the war, which is a democratic right. Will that be curbed as well? Will that be seen as anti-national? Because few media outlets have been blocked entirely. So that raises key questions about fundamental rights, right to free speech and expression, right to free press. Right? So that is something you need to be mindful of as well. But as I said, let's wait and watch what happens. I think for today, this discussion should be more than enough. One last point before I close this discussion, the term fog of war. What is fog of war? Right now, we are engulfed in this situation. When conflict breaks out between two powers, two big powers especially, the lack of genuine, authentic information, the spread of fake news and disinformation creates a fog. Now, what happens when you're surrounded by fog? Imagine in the winter months, you're in northern parts of India, in Delhi. Let's say it's a month of January. You wake up early in the morning, you see the whole area is surrounded by fog. What happens when you're surrounded by fog? You can't see clearly. You don't have visibility as to what's happening, what's next, right? So figuratively, that's what is happening right now. There is a lack of genuine, authentic information flow, right? The government has to keep a check on information during these times, keeping national security in mind, keeping operational security in mind. But The spread of fake news and disinformation. Even Indians, many responsible Indians, including Indian media channels, are spreading a lot of unverified fake claims on social media. I'm sure you would have seen that. So this creates a fog around us. We don't know what's happening. Nobody knows what's going to happen. There's no clarity, and that is what creates panic. I think this is where the government also should be a little more transparent. If not, of course, entire transparency is not possible. It's impossible during such times. National security attains a higher priority. Operational security attains a higher priority. Narrative management becomes important because we are locked in a psychological war, information war with Pakistan. At the same time, Indian public needs to know as well. There should be a slightly better flow of information, a better management as to what government communicates to the public. So this is something we need to pay attention to, clear the fog, or else there would be further increase in such incidents, right? Because you never know, during such sensitive times, fake news could result in unrest, right? It could be used to instigate and trigger communal unrest as well. The enemy might resort to this tactic. So it's very important to keep the channels of communication pretty open and as much as possible transparent, and ensure that there is better flow of information to clear the fog of war. Yeah. So understand these terminologies, these concepts. See, that is what I thought I would do today. There's no point if I just give you a narration of what has happened, what's happening. I'm sure all of you know that better than me, right? All of you would be hooked to TV channel, social media. You already have all the updates. That's why I just gave you a sequence of events quickly and then focused on the concepts, focused on the assessment and analysis. And I really hope this discussion has been of some use, of some help. Now let's look at the next topic. It's related to what's happening. It's related to India, Pakistan, but slightly different. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, has approved a $1 billion bailout to Pakistan. As you all know, Pakistan has been staring at a serious economic crisis for many years. Pakistan is one country in the world which has received the maximum number of IMF bailouts. That tells you a lot about Pakistan's state of its economy. It tells you everything about the Pakistani state and establishment, the deep state, and their priorities. Their economy has always been in this state. Their forex reserves have always depleted. The average Pakistani doesn't have access to good education, healthcare, power, jobs. And yet, all the funds are diverted towards defense, military, nuclear program, and including terrorism. So Pakistan has taken IMF support 24 times since 1958. There is another round which is being worked out. If that is approved, it would be the 25th time that Pakistan would have got assistance from the IMF. Since 2019, in the last 6 years, 5 to 6 years, it has received 4 rounds of assistance from IMF. In the last 35 years since 1989, 28 years Pakistan has begged IMF for support and assistance. Out of the last 35 years since 1989, 28 years Pakistan has gone with a begging bowl to IMF. This has been the state of Pakistan's economy. Now, IMF is responsible for bailing out economies which are in crisis. We saw that with Sri Lanka recently, right? Sri Lanka received an extended fund facility when it faced a liquidity crisis, a forex collapse. India was in a similar position at one point in 1991 when we faced a severe balance of payments crisis. We did receive bailout from the IMF at that point. But problem is IMF support is always conditional. They place a lot of conditions on the country asking for help. They ask you to devalue your currency. They ask you to open up your economy for free markets, for foreign investments, foreign competition. So that could hurt your economic sovereignty. The problem is IMF is largely controlled by the West. Especially European Union has a strong hold over the IMF and the other Bretton Woods institution, the World Bank. Right? These two are called the Bretton Woods institutions. They were born out of the Bretton Woods Conference in 1940s. The World Bank is primarily dominated, controlled by the US, whereas IMF is primarily controlled by European Union along with the US. These are Western-controlled financial institutions. That is the reason why they are opposed by emerging economies, the BRICS countries. Right? Now, IMF has approved another bailout package. It is part of a $7 billion extended fund facility which Pakistan has been seeking. Clear? It has already received around $2 billion worth of support, And mind you, this is pure cash which is provided. That clear? In extended fund facility, it is cash which is transferred from the IMF to Pakistan. Yeah. So an additional $1 billion assistance in cash has been approved, and along with this, there is another $1.3 billion which is being considered as part of a RSF facility. RSF stands for Resilience and Sustainable Facility, where different IMF reserves are used, including SDR, special drawing rights, and the support is given to help an economy which is struggling to sustain itself, to build resilience in that economy. So another $1.3 billion is under consideration. So total of $2.3 billion is something Pakistan is expecting. Now, why am I discussing this? Because India took a certain stand during this review that happened yesterday. Right? There was a review of providing this assistance to Pakistan. It's part of a regular normal process. But it comes at a very challenging time. Obviously, you would expect that India would oppose this and vote against the IMF assistance to Pakistan. But India did not vote for no. We opposed it, but we abstained from the vote. India abstained from the vote. During the discussion, we raised an opposition. India said Pakistan has a poor track record. It doesn't know how to manage its economy. It has been dependent on the IMF. It has become too big to fail. And more importantly, India raised a very valid concern. Pakistan could possibly use these funds, divert this towards sponsoring terrorism. So India raised a strong opposition, but we did not vote no. Why? That is what you should learn. You should understand this. It's a very important concept again. We only abstained from the vote. So there is some criticism which has come from the opposition, where they're criticizing the government of India for not voting against it, asking why we just abstained. We should have voted against it. Now let me tell you, in IMF, there is no option to vote no. Please understand this. At the IMF, when issues like this are discussed, there is no option. Formally, there is no option at all to vote no. Why? I'll explain this. See, the IMF is governed by an executive board comprising of 25 directors from different countries and group of countries. There are a total of 190 member countries. So some countries have individual representation through their directors, and some group of countries will have a collective representation. Totally, there are 25 directors. So they're from India, there is a director on the IMF executive board. But however, not all of them have equal voting power. There is no equal voting power at the IMF. It is the same case with World Bank as well. Your voting power, your voting share is dependent on what you're contributing. So each country doesn't mean one vote. Having a director on the board doesn't mean you have one vote. No. Depends on how much you have contributed to the IMF. Depends on the voting share you have been allotted. Now, the complaint of emerging economies like India, China, and others who are part of the BRICS is that US and European Union are not allowing the emerging economies to increase their voting share. That is how they are controlling IMF and World Bank. United States has a 16% vote share at the IMF. European Union has a much larger voting share. That is why I told you at the start, these Western countries are controlling IMF and World Bank by retaining their vote share, by not allowing emerging economies to increase their vote share. Clear? So even if we wanted to, block this funding, we can't do it because we don't have the vote share, we don't have enough support. And more importantly, if you look at the process of IMF, if you look at what's the technical process adopted, there is no option to vote no because IMF decisions are made by consensus. Either all members will agree to it and those who don't agree can abstain from it. So there is no formal option to vote no. India couldn't have cast a no vote. There is no such option. So how will you cast a no vote? Right? Let's say in UPSC prelims, UPSC has given only 3 options, A, B, C. There is no D. How will you mark the 4th option if it is not even there? Something like that. So there is no vote option. The no vote is not present in the IMF at all. You can either support it or abstain from it. So India has chosen to abstain. So this is based on the principles, the policy policy of India and the principles of IMF. We have strongly opposed it. We have exposed Pakistan's poor track record in its economic management. Rather, it's always economic mismanagement from Pakistan. We have also pointed out that Pakistan is known to divert such funds towards sponsoring terrorism, towards militarization. After raising this opposition and exposing Pakistan, India abstained from the vote. That is the strongest stand India could have taken, and India has done that. So Pakistan is now going to get another $1 billion out of the $7 billion which has been promised. This is cash, and another $1.3 billion through a RSF facility. Now, coming to the next few articles, let's go through them quickly. There is an editorial that we have to discuss and two columns, and after that, two small prelims articles. So let's talk about this editorial that's focused on the Nipah virus. Let's understand this quickly, both for prelims and mains. This can be important. So why is Nipah virus in the news again? Nipah virus is in the news because a new case has been reported, of course, in Kerala. There are two states in India which are very, very prone to Nipah incidents or Nipah outbreaks. One is Kerala, the other is West Bengal. Kerala, West Bengal have seen the highest incidence of Nipah cases. In the Mamlapuram district, a patient has emerged with Nipah virus infection, but it's not an outbreak, it's a spillover. This is the concept I want to explain to you today. The difference between Nipah spillover and Nipah outbreak. What's the difference between the two? Right now, the case which has been reported is a case of Nipah's spillover. It's not an outbreak. We have seen outbreaks in the past. In 2018, 2023, there were major Nipah outbreaks that happened. Okay, I'll explain the difference between the two. Just wait for some time. Before that, let's understand what is Nipah. I'm sure many of you may not be aware of this, but some of you would have read about it because it's a recurring topic from many years. Nipah virus is a deadly, infectious, disease-causing pathogen. It is primarily found in fruit bats. Fruit bats are the primary reservoir host. They act as the animal host, the reservoir host, along with pigs. Pigs are also known to host the Nipah virus. The Nipah first was reported in Southeast Asia. It is primarily a pathogen seen in the tropical belt of Asia. Right? It's largely seen in Asia in the tropical belt where you have hot, humid climate. So there is a clear connection between the pathogenicity and its ability to spread and the climatic conditions present in parts of South Asia and Southeast Asia. The first outbreak was in late 1990s, in 1998 in Malaysia. In fact, it's called Nipah after the village in Malaysia. Nipah is a village in Malaysia where the first outbreak was reported. That's why it's called Nipah virus, named after the village where the first outbreak happened in Malaysia in 1998. It has later spread to South Asia, which is a different variant, by the way. There is a different variant which has circulated in Bangladesh. Bangladesh also is periodically affected by episodes of Nipah spillovers and outbreaks. And India, as I said, in India, it's primarily in Kerala and West Bengal. So if you come in contact with the fluids of the fruit bat or infected pigs, that is how you contract the virus. Right? For example, let's say fruit bats have eaten or consumed certain fruits, half eaten, half consumed fruits, and you go and take a bite of the same fruit. Right? You could get infected. Or let's say you come in contact with the droppings of these infected pigs or the fruit bats. Or if you come in contact with the carcass, essentially the dead body of these organisms. So that is when you have a risk. When you come in touch with the contaminated fluids, that is when you are at direct risk of contracting Nipah. Understood? So the symptoms, they range in severity. It initially leads to regular flu-like symptoms, fever, a body ache, a severe headache, nausea, and it could lead to impact on the brain, causing inflammation in the brain as well, leading to acute encephalitis. Then it affects the lung and the respiratory system, leading to severe respiratory distress. and eventually it can become fatal. The mortality rate is quite high. That's why Nipah is quite dangerous. But there is no vaccine available as of now. No specific treatment is available. No specific line of treatment is available. No vaccine is available. So right now it is just symptomatic treatment. Antivirals are administered. That's why early diagnosis is important. Early diagnosis will help in catching the infection early, in the early stages, prevent further spread, reduce the severity. The patients are put on antivirals and symptomatic care and allow them to recover naturally. Clear? So there's no vaccine, no specific drug available to treat the disease. Now, coming back to Nipah spillover and Nipah outbreak, what's the difference? So, what we have seen in Kerala right now in Mamlapuram, just one case which has been reported, that is a case of Nipah spillover. What do you mean by spillover? Spillover occurs when there is a transmission from an animal or a bird to a human. One human being would have come in contact with the infected animal or the infected bird or their contaminated fluids and contracted the infection. That is a case of a spillover. We call it a zoonotic transfer. It's a zoonotic transfer which would have happened from the animal world to the human world, where one case comes up, one individual who has come in contact contracts it, and that becomes a spillover, where the virus has spilled over from the animal world into the human world. But it will not result in a bigger outbreak. Let's say those who come in contact with this infected person, they don't test positive, they will test negative. So such a specific strain of Nipah, which only spills over from animals and birds to one human, that is a case of spillover. It does not spread to other humans. There is no human to human transmission. No human to human transmission. Please remember this. So this is Nipah spillover. It is slightly moderate. It's not life-threatening usually. It leads to, worst case, it leads to acute encephalitis syndrome. It leads to acute encephalitis, inflammation of the brain, but early detection will help in saving the patient. Death can occur, fatality can occur if not treated. Encephalitis can be a fatal condition, but it is not very severe. The viral load is not that severe when there is a zoonotic transfer which has happened, which is a case of spillover. Now, research has shown that spillover is caused by certain strains. Certain strains of Nipah, they can't spread from human to human. I mean, they're not evolved, they're not mutated enough to spread from human to human to cause a bigger outbreak. Outbreak occurs when there is human to human transmission happening. Are you clear on this? Let's say one person contracted Nipah from an animal or a bird, got infected, and following further mutation of the virus, right? If it starts human to human transmission, that results in an outbreak. Let's say one infected person spread it to 4 or 5 people, and further it spreads to 20, 30 contacts. So that is an outbreak which we saw in 2018, 2023. And Nipah outbreak is more severe than Nipah spillover. Please remember this for your prelims. UPSC might ask you. It might give a statement. Nipah outbreaks are more severe compared to Nipah spillover. The statement is correct. Yeah, because Nipah outbreak, this strain of Nipah which causes an outbreak, which causes human to human transmission, it is known to cause acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, which is life-threatening. The viral load is many times higher according to research. When you're part of an outbreak, you report a higher viral load to spread all across the body, causing severe lung infection, leading to severe respiratory distress, which can easily turn fatal. And the worst part, when you have a respiratory distress syndrome, you basically start coughing. And the more you cough with higher viral load, you are going to spread it more, increasing the chances of the spread of the disease. Correct? Are you able to understand this? When you're affected with the respiratory distress, you will cough. And coughing leads to easy transmission of the virus, air-to-air transmission, increasing possibility of human-to-human transmission. So that is why outbreaks are more serious. Outbreaks are more severe. The viral load is also significantly higher, leading to a very quick degradation of the patient's health, leading to increased fatalities. Believe it or not, in 2018 and 19, 90% of those infected in an outbreak, they lost their lives. Mortality rate was very high, 70, 80, 90% sometimes. We saw this in 2023 as well. So outbreaks are much more dangerous, caused by a slightly different strain. Spillovers caused by a slightly different strain can be easily contained because only one person is getting affected. That too with a slow progression, with a lesser viral load, and with right treatment, it can be managed and you can ensure it doesn't cause acute encephalitis. So that is why more research is needed. For example, new studies have shown, genetic sequencing has shown that strain in Bangladesh is different from the strain in India. Obviously, the Southeast Asian variant was already established as a different variant. But even within South Asia, there are different strains that are circulating. So we need further genetic studies. Genetic sequencing has to be done. And more importantly, this data has to be shared. The government and research organizations, they not only have to focus on more research, conduct more genetic sequencing, and they also have to share the data, release the data publicly in the global space so that researchers can pick up the data and try to further the research to understand Nipah virus, the different strains of Nipah virus, what causes a spillover, what causes an outbreak. We still don't understand that. That is something that needs to be done. That's what the editorial is suggesting. The National Institute of Virology in Pune, the ICMR, and concerned institutions, right, which are involved in genetic sequencing, they should bring out the data publicly, share it around the world with researchers so that we can bring more scientific evidence to understand the different strains, the mutations which are happening, and why some strains cause spillover, some strains cause outbreak. That is what we learn from this article. Next, on page 10, we have this important column related to heat waves, which is a common recurrence during the summer months. Recently, Delhi has crossed a dangerous mark, 41 degrees Celsius and above, and this could further go up to 45 degrees and above. Several parts of northern, western, central parts of India will reel under heat waves in the coming weeks, and this is a impending disaster, a cyclical, repeating disaster, which we have seen time and again. The focus of this article is on protecting the informal workers, especially in urban areas. That is the focus of this column. Because obviously, when deadly heat conditions are present, in urban areas, it is the informal workers who are the most vulnerable, the most exposed. See, most of us, you and me, we'd never experienced the true impact of a heat wave. Don't think you feeling a little hot, sweating more is the impact of heat wave. That's not the true impact because we always rush inside our homes, our offices. We have access to water, right? We have access to fluids, electrolytes. We can afford to buy electrolytes if we want. We have access to fans, air conditioners, coolers, right? We have access to cooling solutions and hydration solution. We have access to cooling and hydration solutions. We can take shelter, right? You have a roof over your head. You're working in safe spaces. You're studying in safe spaces with a shelter over your head. So you're not really exposed to the impact of heat wave. All of us, we really don't understand the impact of heat wave. This is understood only by those who are forced to be in the open because of their occupation, because of their income, their social status. So it's always the poor, the weak, the vulnerable who are pushed to work in the open to earn a livelihood. So, for example, construction workers, right? Daily wage earners, street vendors as well. Those who resort to manual work, they're forced to work in the open because they earn a daily wage. If they don't work, they will not have money to feed their family. They'll have to sleep on empty stomach that night. So the only way most informal workers can earn and sustain their livelihood is by going out in the open, braving the heat and working, especially during the peak exposure hours. So this is a huge risk that we are subjecting our population to. Given the extent of informal workers in our country, the number of construction workers, daily wage workers, street vendors, etc., you're exposing them to significant risk. So what can be done from a policy making perspective to protect them, to mitigate the disaster? Because this is an avoidable disaster. Don't forget, heat wave is a disaster. And especially climate change, global warming is aggravating the frequency, the intensity of this disaster. Hundreds of lives could get lost. Because if you have high exposure, if you don't cool yourself, hydrate yourself, you will suffer severe physiological conditions. You could suffer from dehydration, which leads to muscle cramps, which could lead to fatigue, nausea, and eventual heat cramps and heat strokes. which could turn fatal, killing the person as well. We have seen incidents of construction workers dying. We have seen incidents of rickshaw pullers dying because of excessive exposure to heat. So, what can the government do? Central government, the state, and the local governments, what can they do to plan, prepare, prevent, and mitigate this disaster from happening? Right? The NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, which is the nodal authority here, it issued a set of guidelines in 2019. It issued a set of guidelines on heat wave management, especially for urban areas and those with occupational risks. These guidelines make no explicit mention of informal workers. This is concerning. There is only a general reference made to occupational workers, occupational hazards, but there is no explicit mention of informal workers in the guidelines issued by the NDMA. Is that clear? So this is a major shortcoming that we have, a lacuna in the guidelines at the central level. Let me explain how this matters. Now, if you look at the city level planning, eventually each city will be responsible for these plans. The heat action plan has been adopted by many cities in the country, the municipal bodies, the city corporations, etc. The heat action plans, they are also having some shortcomings. They do not pay much attention to informal workers. They don't focus much on creating cooling solutions, providing spaces of shelter, creating hydration facilities, or restricting working hours, mandating the employers to restrict work hours during the peak sun exposure hours. Such measures are not adequately present in the heat action plan implemented at the city level. Now, if you compare with other countries, there are few countries which have done much better than India. For example, in the US, if you look at California, Oregon, these states have a very robust heat action plan in place where they strictly mandate employers not to force their employees to work during the peak exposure hours. This could be anywhere between 10 a.m. in the morning all the way till 4 to 5 p.m. in the evening. Right? That's the peak hours, especially between 12 in the afternoon all the way till 4 p.m. So in California and in few states in the US, there are strict restrictions on the employers. You can't make your employees work in the open. You can't force them to work. You can't take away their salaries. You can't cut their salary. Make them work early in the morning, later in the evening, or in the night, not during the peak exposure hours. They are provided with adequate facilities to take rest. This is built into the city code, into the city laws. Rest hours are mandatory. For every 1 hour of work, maybe 10 minutes of rest. Every 2 hours of work, 20 minutes of rest. Adequate cooling solutions have to be provided, hydration, along with medical support, emergency support if necessary. Even countries like Australia, France, Qatar, they all have similar regulations in place at the city level. They restrict work hours, force this on the employer. And if someone loses their salary, they're compensated by the government so that they're not forced to work in the open. They're given water and hydration facilities. Across the city, there are cool drinking water facilities made available. There is shelter created. Let's say on the walkways, right, where you the footpaths or the walk bridges, shelter is created so you need not be exposed to the heat all the time. At strategic locations in a city, rest places are created so those who are working in the street, construction workers, street vendors, can go and take some rest. And at these shelters, cooling solutions are provided, fans, air conditioners are provided. In India, this is almost completely missing. There are few cities which have done pretty well. For example, Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad has a pretty robust heat action plan. Odisha has done slightly well by restricting work hours. Delhi at least has some shelters and cooling facilities available. But across other parts of India, there is almost zero facilities created. They all have heat action plan, but the required measures are not provided. Required facilities are not created. More importantly, funding also is not provided. So without funds, without resource allocation, without planning, how will this happen? That is why we need to rethink urban governance, rethink how our cities are built and designed. Correct? For example, you can turn every bus stop into a shelter facility, create proper shade in each and every bus stop, provide air conditioners in bus stop, which is what Singapore has done. You go to Singapore, 90% of the bus stops are air conditioned. Right? Create water facilities, give them drinking water so that people can freely access drinking water. Set up medical camps. So those who feel sick, those who feel dehydrated, nauseated, those who suffer from heat cramps can quickly seek immediate attention. So this is what needs to be done. Workers should have an option to take an off if they don't feel like working during heat waves. They should not be losing their daily wages for that. For that, you need compensation. Right? You need to push companies to treat this as part of their CSR, corporate social responsibility. Let them take part of the burden. Let government take the other half of the burden so that street vendors, construction workers, and others can be compensated if they lose their daily wages. So when you provide for compensation, people will not be forced to work in the open. Informal workers will not be pushed because of their occupational weakness to go out in the heat and work. And if you give them these facilities, adequate time to rest, adequate cooling and hydration facilities and shelter, you can almost avoid all these deaths that occur because of heat waves. So it is an avoidable, preventable disaster, but yet we allow this to happen. Right? So central government has a responsibility to bring out the right guidelines, update NDMA guidelines. State governments have a responsibility to frame the right policies, and the city level administrative bodies, your urban municipal corporation bodies, they have a bigger responsibility to plan appropriately, fund these initiatives, and rethink urban governance and urban facilities which are created. Build more parks, create mini forests, create water bodies. This will help in moderating the urban heat island effect. Provide the facilities needed where people can rest and take shelter and cool down. This is what is needed in India, or else life, day-to-day life in our Indian cities will become unbearable in the coming years and coming decades. Now, coming to the next article. This will not take much of your time, a very quick and small discussion on this. This is focused on the importance of right nutrition. It's focused on food security. See, today, the world is staring at massive levels of hunger, massive levels of malnutrition, and India is right on top of this list. In the Global Hunger Index, I'm sure you would have heard about Global Hunger Index. Can you tell me in the comments which institution publishes Global Hunger Index? That's an assignment for you. Find out which organization, which institution publishes the Global Hunger Index. Please mention the answer in the comments. According to latest Global Hunger Index for 2024, India's ranking is 105 out of 127 countries. This is not a rank India should be proud of, right? It highlights our poor performance in terms of food insecurity, the massive levels of hunger, malnutrition, which is prevalent in the country. But what is shocking, surprising is that there are two extremes in India. As they say, there are two different Indias, right? Completely contrasting with each other. So there is one large section of India which is not having adequate food on their plate. They're not getting the right nutrients, micronutrients. They're suffering from anemia. They're suffering from various nutritional deficiencies. As a result, their growth, their development is getting compromised, especially children who don't receive the right nutrition and the right micronutrients. Their growth, physical development, their cognitive development gets severely compromised. Let me give you the data here. It is quite shocking. According to National Family Health Survey 5, there are 194 million Indians who are undernourished. 194 million Indians. High levels of stunting. Underweight children are reported. 35.5% of children under 5 years are stunted in the country. Meaning the height they grow to is not up to the average. Right? For every year, there is a certain growth sprout a child should display. If a child is getting right nutrition, during these growth spurts, they will grow to a certain height. An average height is expected. But 35.5% of our children who are under 5 years, they are stunted. They are not reaching the right height. They are underweight. They are wasted. Wasting is a case where a child does not reach the right weight for their height. For a certain height and age, you need to reach a certain weight as well. And a number of children under 5 years of age are not reaching that. They are getting wasted. This is called wasting. The numbers are alarming. It's more than 30%. More than 30% of our kids are stunted, wasted, and undernourished. Lot of pregnant women in our country are anemic. More than 50% of India's women, pregnant women, are anemic. So this is one extreme of India. On the other extreme, there is another set of India where millions are obese, overweight, because they are primarily consuming the wrong kind of food, the wrong kind of nutrition. So, how do you address this problem? There are two extremes which are present. How do you strike that right balance? This is where the government should not only focus on the sustainable development goals, because SDG goals focus on nutrition, focus on food security, agricultural productivity. So, there is a need to focus more on native food, native crops. The reason why obesity is high, the reason why even undernutrition is high, right? People who are obese or overweight don't think they're getting good nutrition. If you check the vitals and indicators, they actually would be undernourished. They would be lacking in micronutrients because there is an excessive reliance on processed food, ultra processed food, junk food, right? So consuming locally available food, which is sustainable environmentally as well, is always more nutritious. Consuming native food, what is native to your place, to your region, which has evolved scientifically over centuries, that is better suited for your health. And that is something we have largely forgotten. And this is a problem not just in India, it's a global problem. China has the same problem, US has the same problem, right? So it's about encouraging the right eating habits, promoting right awareness. And this starts at the school level. I think we had a discussion on this few days ago, where I gave you the example of the schooling system in Japan, how Japan has built a wonderful system where children, right from 3 to 4 years of age, they are taught about nutrition. They are given cooking classes. They are encouraged to consume healthy, nutritious food and stay completely away from junk and processed food. Schools hold these classes, train the students. They involve them in cropping of plants. They teach them about where the food comes from. I'm sure majority of our children in school, they have no idea where the food is coming from, right? They think food is coming from packets. It's coming from the grocery stores. That's because we are not exposing our children to cropping. We are not showing them the plants, the sources of food, which is where it is coming from. So countries have such plans in place. Japan is a prime example of that. That is something that can be inculcated in our midday meals program, right at the school level, right? Get the children involved in growing their crops. Ensure local procurement is done from the nearby localities. So it benefits the local farmers as well. Promote local food and local crops. Millets is a great source, right? That's what India is trying to do, trying to create a millet revolution. We have prioritized the focus on millet and we have taken it global as well to bring global attention on millets, which are nutritious, they are climate resilient, right? And beneficial to farmers as well. So, such a revolution is needed in India's food culture. So, what's currently happening is quite alarming. Our dependency on processed, ultra processed food, dependency on foreign alien food culture, and on the other hand, the lack of availability of right food and nutrition for a large section of our population, which is causing hunger and malnutrition. This can be solved with only right policies, right awareness, right cropping, right agricultural policies, and right nutrition focused policies. Understood? There should be focus on introducing fortified food items, micronutrients if they are missing, let's say something like iodine, or let's say something like folic acid, right, or iron. These are critical micronutrients because the deficiencies can cause very serious conditions. So the one way you can fix them is by fortifying the food items, like how salt is fortified with iodine or rice is fortified with folic acid, right? So this is something that India should adopt at scale. Focus on the schools, focus on our farming system, focus on the supply chain, ensure that farm wastage is reduced. The post harvest losses are very high in our country. After harvest, we don't have enough warehousing, enough cold storage. Lot of good food is wasted. Local food gets wasted. And then we end up procuring food from faraway places, which is also expensive and which may not be nutritious enough for you. So there is a need to create that culture, imbibe that culture across the country. It's not just an individual or a family responsibility. This is more of a social and a government responsibility as well. So this completes my detailed analysis of all the big articles in today's paper. I hope you guys have understood everything. Now, give me 2 to 3 minutes more. We'll quickly wrap up the discussion by talking about the two prelims articles which are there. On page 4, we have an article which refers to a very important cultural site in Jharkhand, the Parasnath Hill in the Giridih district of Jharkhand. It's located in the Chota Nagpur Plateau. It is a very mineral rich region. In the Giridih district of Jharkhand, you have the Parasnath Hill range, and there is one sacred hill, which is a pilgrimage shrine. So it's also called Samit, Shikar, Marang Buru by the local Santal tribe. It is very, very sacred for the local Santals. I'm sure you would have heard about Santals, a very prominent Central Indian tribe. So Santals consider the Parasnath Hill to be sacred. It is of great cultural and religious significance to the Santal tribe. Every year they have this ritual where members of the tribe, they go around the hill, the forest present around it, and they used to go on a hunting, essentially a ritualistic hunting where they would hunt animals many decades and centuries ago. That's how tribal communities uh, have their livelihood. I mean, they basically are gatherers, hunters and gatherers. So they would hunt animals as part of a ritualistic cultural religious practice. Because don't forget, tribals always revere, worship nature around them. They worship the forest, they worship Mother Nature, they worship the animals as well. So, as part of this traditional tribal cultural religious heritage, they would go on a hunting exercise and a gathering exercise. And it's of great significance for the community because there would be a tribal assembly in the forest. The tribal leaders would meet, all the communities would come together to discuss and solve their issues and solve their disputes. So, this is an ongoing traditional practice. But now this is getting disrupted because there is a court order. There is a high court order which has tried banning the ritual hunting exercise. But please understand, with modern civilization, the Adivasis, they had stopped the ritualistic hunting. They don't go hunt the animal actually. It's more of a ritual they would do, a symbolic hunting. They wouldn't kill any animal. They would not actually physically kill an animal. They would go on a ritualistic hunt just to mark their religious cultural heritage. The tribal leaders would meet and discuss, and they would gather some fruits, berries, etc. And this is part of their rich heritage. Now the High Court has intervened. Why? Because there is a controversial claim. Because this shrine is not just sacred for Adivasis, it is very, very sacred in Jainism. For Jains, for the Jain community, it's a sacred pilgrimage because this is where it's believed that the 23rd Jain Tirthankara, Parshvanatha, attained salvation over here. That's why it's called Parshnath Hill. So Jains carry out a sacred pilgrimage. And as you know, Jains are strictly opposed to any form of harm to life or living organisms. So this had led to a court petition seeking a ban on the tribal practice of hunting, even though they were not actually hunting an animal. It was just a ritualistic, symbolic practice they were doing. High Court stay has been brought on it. But now the Santals have said, we will not follow this. We will not follow the court orders. We will continue with our religious cultural practice. So this is where I think you need to understand the limits of law, the limits to which, for example, let's say when you think about tribal rights, indigenous rights, they have certain practices, traditions which have continued for centuries, which even predate your nation state. So sometimes you need to respect those cultural rights, give the space for Adivasis and tribals to continue with their cultural religious practices. As I said, Santals, they no longer hunt the animal. So don't think it's an environmental violation or it's a violation of environmental law. Right? They understand that hunting is today prohibited under Wildlife Protection Act, but they just want to continue the symbolic practice. So such a conflict which arises between two communities involving the state, involving the law, could easily spiral into a bigger issue. That is primarily how Naxals have been able to drive recruitment in this belt, in the central India region. When Adivasis felt pushed by the government and the law, that is when the tribals were pushed into the hands of the left-wing extremists, the Maoists. Right? So this is an issue that you need to be mindful of, and you should know about the Parasnath Hill, its cultural religious significance. Coming to the last article for today, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has spoken about a very serious cyber threat for India's banking system. India's banking and financial system is facing a severe threat from DDoS attacks. Finance Minister has said DDoS attacks represent a significant threat for our banking and financial system, but India is well prepared to deal with the threat. According to Nirmala Sitharaman, India has put in place anti-DDoS measures to counter these DDoS attacks. And the concerned institutions, the nodal authorities, are fully geared up to protect India's banking and financial infrastructure. So, which are these institutions? We have CERT in Computer Emergency Response Team India under Ministry of Electronics and IT, which is the nodal authority to protect India's cyberspace, to defend India against cyber attacks, to monitor the cyberspace for threats, and to counter the malwares and the emerging cyber threats, including DDoS attacks. Then we also have NCIIPC. What is NCIIPC? National Critical Information Protection Center. It was recently set up in 2013-2014 based on the National Cybersecurity Policy that was adopted with the Manmohan Singh government. This dedicated institution protects the critical information infrastructure of the country. It protects the IT networks, the computer systems, and the networks of our critical infrastructure. It could be the banking financial system. It could be the mobile internet infrastructure of India, the power plants, power grids of India, airports and seaports of India, military and government installations. All this constitutes critical infrastructure of the country. So the computer systems which control their operations, the networks which are interlinked, they are guarded, protected by NCIIPC to defend them against any cyber attacks. So both these concerned authorities have taken substantial measures to build anti-DDoS capability into our banking and financial system, which is part of our critical infrastructure. Defend them against rising threats from DDoS attacks. Now, coming to the most important point, what is DDoS? Some of you might know this, those who are engineers, computer engineers especially, I'm sure you would know about this, but I know there are many non-engineers as well who may not know what is DDoS. DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service. Distributed Denial of Service attack. Now imagine there is a computer server which you are trying to access. Let's give a good example so you can easily understand this. Let's say there is a UPSC server. UPSC notification has come out. All of you are applying for the upcoming exam. So all the aspirants, million plus aspirants from India are accessing UPSC website. Let's imagine it's the last day for application. So lakhs of aspirants are trying to access UPSC website to apply for the prelims exam. So there is a certain traffic which has increased, but UPSC would have anticipated this increase in traffic. UPSC knows that as the exam date approaches, that's when students will become serious and apply. UPSC knows that most aspirants procrastinate. I'm sure many of you would have done it as well. You would have applied at the last minute. So generally, the traffic peaks during the last date, and UPSC knows that very well. So it would have built sufficient capacity into the server to handle multiple simultaneous requests. Imagine lakhs of users are trying to access it, and still UPSC server can serve all the requests. Right? Everybody is able to download the application form, fill the form and submit the form, make the payment as well. Because the server has been built with a certain capacity. If let's say UPSC is expecting 1 million simultaneous requests, just to keep safety in mind, it would have created an additional buffer space, an additional safety buffer to handle, let's say, 2 million requests. If 1 million is the expected peak traffic, just for safety reasons, to ensure the server doesn't crash, UPSC would have created a server with a capacity of 2 million requests. The server can basically handle 2 million simultaneous requests. Now, what if there is a disgruntled aspirant? Let's say a veteran aspirant who has never cleared the exam because he didn't prepare. Now he has a grudge on UPSC. But he has good cyber skills. He wants to attack UPSC. He wants to affect other UPSC aspirants as well. So let's say this cyber attacker wants to disrupt the traffic. He wants to ensure, because he is resenting UPSC itself, he's resenting UPSC aspirants, he has a motive. Let's say it's just a hypothetical example we are taking. Let's say He wants to disrupt genuine aspirants from applying for the exam. So what will he do? He will try to launch a DDoS attack. What is DDoS attack? Distributed denial of service. By using computer bots, he can generate a massive flood of requests to overwhelm the server's capacity. A good cyber attacker can understand the capacity of the server, right? He will realize that, okay, the server can handle maximum 2 million requests. Now he will take over computers around the world or create an algorithm, create a malware, a code, which will mimic the action of bots, which will create the action of multiple computers and generate fake requests. Fake requests are raised. 3-4 million requests are raised, flooded from around the world by using proxy servers, by using VPNs. So from around the world, a distributed attack is launched. That's why it's called distributed denial of service. It's a distributed attack because the requests are coming from different corners of the world. The bot computers might be present in different parts of the world. The requests would be flooding in from different IP addresses around the world. These fake requests will try to overwhelm the capacity of the server so that the server can crash. This is the primary objective of DDoS attack. That's why it is called denial of service. Genuine users like you, genuine UPSC aspirants, if they can't access the website on the last day, what will happen? You will panic. If website shows there is an error or it has crashed and you're not able to access it, you will panic. You will fear that you can't apply for the exam, you can't appear for the exam. Genuine users are blocked. They are denied the service. That's why it's called denial of service attack. It's a distributed attack because the bot requests are coming from around the world. It's distributed. It's denial of service attack because genuine service to genuine customers is getting denied. So when the server goes down and crashes, genuine users get affected. And along with this, when servers crash and go down, the basic cybersecurity measures also go down for a brief period. The firewall, as we call it, the first line of defense goes down. This creates a vulnerability, and the attacker can hack into the server and steal sensitive data. They can deface the website. We have seen this happen recently, where Indian defense companies and institutions and websites have been targeted by Pakistani cyber attackers. They have mounted DDoS attacks, taken down the servers, and using the vulnerability, they have hacked into the server, trying to steal data of Indian veteran soldiers. They have tried to deface the website, posting a message on the website to humiliate India. Right? So in this case, the angry veteran UPSC aspirant who's angry with UPSC, he might try to humiliate UPSC by posting a message, let's say a humiliating message on the web page. So he has not only denied access to genuine aspirants, but he would have attacked the UPSC website or stolen sensitive data from the UPSC website. So that is the impact of DDoS attacks. Imagine this happening in banking sector, right? Imagine a bank server goes down. If the customers are not served, what will happen? Millions of transactions will not go through. They'll fail. It will have a huge economic cascading effect. Or imagine this happening in financial markets. There is DDoS attack on the stock markets, stock exchanges, on the brokers, right? So billions of transactions will not go through, resulting in severe financial loss for the country. That is why India is taking immediate urgent steps. So this is part of our cyber preparedness to build resilience against DDoS attacks. Today, there are many tools available to filter out the fake requests, the bot requests, and allow access only to the genuine requests. There are some amazing technologies available to create redundancy as well. If one server comes under attack, immediately it will switch the genuine customers to another alternate server. So the traffic, the genuine traffic gets diverted. So their service is not affected, while the concerned team will respond to the attack and they'll try to protect the server. So many such tools are available to defend and repel DDoS attacks today. That's what the finance minister has spoken about. So on this note, I bring my detailed analysis and discussion to an end. I hope you guys have understood all the key topics. And if you did, please let me know in the comments. Press the like button and don't forget to share this video with other aspirants. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.